I think we can start. Hello. This is a real international lectures today. Thank you for coming, and we're very happy to have Ann and Katie with us today. As you know, throughout the year, with Martin Luther King, the Social Justice Committee always plans some kind of presentation or conversation about the aspect of nonviolence. And the hope there is to be not just informative, but to be transformative, that it would provide something that would go a little bit deeper and be transformative and not just stay here. So back in November, committee was raising ideas for possible topics, and someone had recommended a video by Brian Massingale, and he's a Baptist, I think he's baptized, but he gave a very potent line that said, white nationalism is our biggest threat to peace. And that got us thinking that with the elections coming, this might very well be a topic that we should consider, especially given the situation with our country and our understanding of racism and the effects that it has on our culture. So what we're hoping to do today is not just reach for theory working with racism, but to go deeper. Sister Diane had remembered that there was a workshop at Ursuline a couple of years ago led by 3 fabulous people. Sister Kathleen Ryan, who's also Sister of Notre Dame, had been working with justice forever, and 2 other individuals who are here today. So we have 2/3 of the team. Sister Kathleen just had knee surgery, so that wouldn't have been good for her. But we've got the best. Diane said she was very moved with the presentation, and granted it was a length of time, but she said that they had such an effective way of speaking that it would speak to our unconscious biases without making people feel defensive. And that's a feat. So we're very pleased with Anna and Katie being here today to help us walk through that. They are, the Sisters of Notre Dame started their Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation, a national office, and it just happens to be officed here in the east side of Cleveland. But it's the national office for the United States. They both come with vast amounts of background in catechetical formation, pastoral ministry. Anne had spent time doing justice and outreach ministry in 3 Cleveland parishes. She worked with the Diocesan Social Action Office, directing the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Then in 2019, when the national office was being formed, they were both brought in to be able to direct that. Katie has 30 years of experience in education and ministry as well. She started off as a math teacher in high school, but the numbers didn't add up, and it led her into the diocesan pastoral ministry. Oops, I got that mixed up, sorry. But she's worked with youth ministry, a director of religious education. She has a master's in pastoral ministry and theological studies from Ursuline. It's like another connection here. And she also has joined as they're both co-directors. Katie focuses very much on our care for creation aspects, and has one of her specialties is dealing with our corporate stance on racism. So with no more stalling, I introduce to you Ann Clark, Katie Drager.
Well, hello everyone. Thank you, Sister Megan, for that very kind introduction. No pressure now on us, right? So thank you for inviting us and having us here today to talk about this issue that is complex and can be very emotional. And I would just like to share with you right off the bat that I am by no means an expert. I am a continuing learner in this. So along with all of you, I am hoping that we can explore this issue a little more deeply to get today together. I also hope that we feel like we can be honest in our conversation and remain respectful, which I have no doubt will be the way that today will go. I also want to share with you, now does everyone have a booklet and a pen? Does anyone not have that? Because that is what's going to move our day, or our hour. Okay. It was on the floor. Okay. Yes, I am going to give you an outline of that. Yes. Yes, I will. I'm going to share so you know what to expect. Absolutely. I just want to be sure everybody has the materials we need to get started. Okay. And before we do get started, I would like to open today's meeting with a land acknowledgement. This gesture of a land acknowledgement is offered as a way to help us become more aware of the history of the land and the indigenous peoples who lived here before being colonized. It draws to mind the oppressions that indigenous peoples have endured for hundreds of years. It also draws to mind that our Black sisters and brothers worked the land in bondage, stripped of their homeland, language, and identity. Today we acknowledge that the land we live on right here in Cleveland, Ohio, is the traditional territories of the Kaskaskia, Erie, and Mississauga peoples. We commit ourselves to greater awareness and transformation of heart, which will lead us to right the wrongs done in the name of colonialism. And I'd like to ask Katie to come forward and lead us in prayer.
As Bob reminded us, we are surrounded by the Spirit of God, and we are gathered here today. That is what brings the Spirit of God here with us. And so we remember that as we say, Lord Jesus Christ, who reached across the ethnic boundaries between Samaritan, Roman, and Jew, who offered fresh sight to the blind and freedom to captives. Help us to break down the barriers in our community. Help us to see the reality of racism and bigotry, and free us to challenge and uproot it from ourselves, our society, and our world. Amen.
Okay, so the way this hour is going to go, I hope, is we're going to look at three questions and discuss three questions. What is racism? What is white privilege? And what does it mean to be anti-racist? And we're going to do this through reading some quotes and doing an exercise together and having a little bit of time for reflection and then discussion. I think when we're looking at this issue, it's very helpful to have time for reflection and discussion to just figure out where each of us are in this issue. Because we're all on a spectrum, that is, there's no right or wrong way you feel. It's about growing and developing in our awareness and our understanding of this issue. And we do that, God is so good, and Holy Spirit for sure, we do it in community. We do it together, as we heard earlier. Absolutely. So the way I would like to start in this first question, what is racism? You will notice in your booklet there are 4 quotes there. One is from the U.S. bishops in their document, Open Wide Our Hearts. 3 others are from Brian Massengale. I would invite you to read through those quotes and take some time for personal reflection. On the back of your booklet, there's some space for notes. Just think about what resonates with you as you read through these quotes. Then I'm going to invite you to talk to 1 or 2 other people near you, just for a very small group conversation. Then we'll come back and have some larger group discussion. So for right now, take a few minutes, and I will call us back when I feel we're ready to move on to the next facet of this. Just take some time right now to read through the quotes and, take some time for reflection. Okay, now I would invite you to turn to 1 or 2 other people sitting close to you and talk about what resonated with you. There are some questions at the bottom of this section. What speaks to you about these definitions of racism? Do you think they encompass, expand, or shrink your understanding of what racism is? And what challenges you in these quotes about racism? So we're going to take about 10 minutes for some just small group discussion, one-on-one or three of you together. Okay, if we could come back to a larger group. I'm sorry to interrupt. It sounds like you're all having very good conversation. But I would like to get some insights from you, so. Yeah, we're going to come back to the large group. So is there anything anyone would like to share about what you heard or discussed, what resonated with you as you read the quotes? Yes. Yeah.
Check.
Liberal education, and I never met anybody of any different race. I was raised in Detroit. It was all white people, but we were raised to appreciate all people and be loving. And so I thought, well, I don't have any problem with racism, but when you remember when the runner was raped in Central Park years ago, and I was so outraged. I was outraged. This white woman was attacked, and then I thought, luckily I had, what if that had been a black person that had been raped? And then I realized it's in there. It's like in my gut. Nobody taught me. I don't know where I got it, but I have this attitude. So yes, that spoke to me that it's really in there. It's like in the DNA almost. Nobody said a word. Loving family. That my father used to ask me my opinion, which I knew nothing in college about getting along with other races, and so it's an alarming self-discovery process. That's what I'm thinking.
And you hit on something very important. Robin DiAngelo, in her book White Fragility, talks about how whites are born into a racist system. So we may not want to be racist. We feel like we want to judge someone by their content, their character. But the fact remains that whites have the power, the privilege, the authority in our society. And because of that, we have been born into that. We don't even realize it. We don't even understand or realize our own biases or our own prejudices. So we must acknowledge that we have been socialized into this way of seeing one race as superior and other races inferior. That is simply a fact. If we can get past that and acknowledge that, then we can have some productive conversation about what are my biases, what are my blinders, and what then do we do as a community about it? How do we move forward? So it's not so much about looking at individuals, though we all have individual complicity in certain ways. Yet, as a society, how are we going to move forward? So thank you for sharing that. I think that brings up a very important point for all of us. Yes?
Oops, there we go. A lot of this, at least from my perspective in my family growing up, is based on fear. My grandparents were immigrants. They were in the Buckeye area. Like typical immigrants, they started little shops, grocery stores, bakeries, butcher shops. There were friends of my grandparents whose parents were murdered by black people. They were robbed. And that set up a lot of fear and hatred, really, of what was going on. So, but it's a generalization that not everybody is that way. Often my next door neighbor, when we moved in, my husband and I moved into the house, they were Italian. They had a similar experience. Her parents, and she was a senior citizen, had a shop, and they were killed by 3 black men. So, this generalization of they're evil. They're horrible people. It's not true. There are some damaged people, and historically, I can see the damage going from one intergeneration to the next. It gets passed on.
Yeah.
But the fear base, I think, is what was in our family.
Thank you for sharing that.
I would like to point out that we have been shaped by the written word, whether it's in the media or history books in school or fiction, that has shaped perspectives without our even awareness. And, you know, I think we need to relearn what we thought we knew. That the history that we were taught didn't include Robert Smalls. You know, how did I not know about this great American hero until a year ago? So, you know, I just want to point out that, like, growing up in Michigan also, there were those riots in Michigan, that those headlines were frightening. The riots in Detroit, and, you know, it's like, oh gosh, buildings burning, windows being broken. So, you know, it's just, we're not even aware that we've been shaped. Our thoughts have been formed outside of us, even if our parents were not openly racist.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think we have time for one more comment if someone wants to share something.
You have to speak for yourself, because I have not been shaped the way you were shaped. I was born much, much earlier in the century, and my first job teaching was in an all-black neighborhood, and that changed my point of view entirely. And there were only 4 white faces in a school, an elementary school full of 1,500 children. And I certainly learned a lot about living as a black person. And there's strata among the black population as well. Very much so. So you might look for that the next time you're in the community. But some very, very, very helpful black people, and others that didn't want any part of mixed in with whites. They wanted their own society, and that's what they strive for, which is fine. So I guess live and let live. Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you. Because we only have an hour together, I'm sorry we have to move on to our next question, so we're sure we have enough time for everything. But I would encourage you to continue the discussion, the contemplation, the reflection. It sounds like this community is open to looking at these issues. And, you know, I was going to share this at the end, but our office has many resources. And if you decide as a community that you want to continue looking at this issue, there are lots of great ways to do it. So I just put that out there for you to be thinking about. Okay, let's look at the second question, which is, what is white privilege? And there's an exercise that we're going to do together, but before that I would like to read a couple of quotes. As a white person, I realized I had been taught about racism as something that puts others at a disadvantage, but had been taught not to see one of its corollary aspects, white privilege, which puts me at an advantage. I think whites are carefully taught not to recognize white privilege, as males are taught not to recognize male privilege. I have come to see white privilege as an invisible package of unearned assets that I can count on cashing in each day, but about which I was meant to remain oblivious. White privilege is like an invisible, weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, code books, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks. Privilege is, by the social justice definition, the advantages people have that they don't often think about because they have never had to experience the oppressive side. Dr. James Knight wrote this book called Heart, A Journey Toward Cultural Humility. He is actually the Vice President of Equity and Inclusion at St. Edward High School in Lakewood. He has a great exercise in his book that we're going to do about what are your privileges, and he's given us permission to use that exercise today. So white privilege is another one of those topics that can cause a lot of angst, and it is something, though, we need to acknowledge and look at. So I'm going to ask you to do this exercise on your own. Each of these statements that you see, I'm going to ask you to put a check mark next to the one that is true for you. So read each of the statements. If it's true for you, put a check mark next to it. And then we're going to come back and have some discussion about that. Okay, so how was that exercise for you? Okay, we're going to make sure you speak into the microphone so everyone can hear. Oh, yikes, okay.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable?
Just in realizing how deep and in so very, very many situations that my privilege allows me to move more freely in the world.
Thank you.
So I teach social justice in a Catholic college, and I use these questions, and I had a mixed class. So we went into the gym about this size, and we stood in the middle, and people could take a step forward if they answered yes to each question and a step back if they had to answer no. And it was very revealing. All the white students were at the further, the wall forward, and many of the black students were at the wall and behind.
What a visual. Yeah, that's impactful to see it that way. Yeah.
Thank you. This was a great exercise. And it brought to mind my sister, who is dark, short, dark skin compared to mine. And when we were teaching, she was teaching at VA, and then she was also teaching at some of the colleges as an adjunct professor. The question she would always get was, what race are you? Who are you? What is it that, who are you? Because they didn't understand her darkness at all, dark eyes. And so when I'm going through this, I said to myself, I could check this off, but my sister couldn't. And thank God she was my sister that we could talk about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
Is anybody getting cold? Because I can. Oh, glad I asked. This has nothing to do with racism. Anybody? Anybody else?
I was just not surprised because I checked every one of them.
You were not surprised?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So anyone not able to check off almost all of them? Okay. Some of you could not. Okay.
I checked them all off as yes. The one thing that just really hit home was I have never, ever felt afraid to go away from home, that I would always be able to find a place to eat and sleep. No one would ever ask me my color, well, you have to go in that door or you can't sleep here. And I thought what it was like for those people who came north.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in the book, The Great Migration, where they were not ready in the north for the Great Migration. And so you had a mother with 12 or 13 children that she had to bring up on a train. Took them 3 days. They were not allowed to get off to use facilities. She had to provide the food that they were going to eat. And it's, we've lived in a very different world.
Yeah, I have to say, before I began doing this work, and I really have only been doing this work about 4 years officially, maybe even less than that, I never even thought about white privilege. It was a new term for me when I read about it. And it was so eye-opening to realize that I can go and do whatever I want without thinking anything of it. And yet I have heard from folks, people of color, who say, I worry about when I go to the mailbox. I worry about when I just go to the store. I fear for my son's life every day when they leave to go to school. That is heart-wrenching, and it's something that I just never even thought about. So that's why we're having this conversation today, so that we can be thinking about these things, talking about it with our friends and our families, because it's only through this kind of conversation that I think we get to the heart transformation that Sister Megan was talking about. So, gosh, our time is going so fast. I thank you so much for sharing all that you did, and now my colleague Katie is going to take us through the second half of this presentation.
I wanted to just share for a second, as you were talking about this idea of privilege. My husband and I had an opportunity, more than 4 years ago. It was right before I started. Yes. That's okay. My oldest daughter took worked for 1 year with the Sisters of Notre Dame in Uganda, in Busesa. And we had an opportunity to go and see her near the end of her time there. It was the first time in my life that I realized I was white. which sounds really stupid, but I never had to think about it until I arrived in a country where, I don't know, maybe in the whole country, where at least where we were, I saw about 12 people who looked like me. And it really has changed my whole frame of reference. So I think sometimes we need something dramatic to help us see what's right in front of us.
Because of the stories that she knew as a child, that no, she said, I will not go to, she wouldn't go to lunch in Little Italy. I said, well, do the kids at Case know that Little Italy is dangerous still? I mean, I kept trying to convince her that I understand in your childhood, Little Italy was a dangerous place, but it's not anymore for you. She wouldn't go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is dangerous. When I went to Case 25 years ago, we were given a one-page document telling us where we could go, which was safe. And it said very clearly, if you're African American, well then they used the word Negro. If you're Negro or Jewish, do not go up the hill.
Wow. It's very interesting. Well, I wanted to take just a few minutes because it came up in our the first group that I sat with, this direct conclusion, and it's about being anti-racist. Okay, and someone said that this is all about the lenses that we look through. Okay, for me, when I look at this idea of being anti-racist, I look at it through a familial lens. I grew up in a family with a lot of addiction. And so I'm very familiar with the 12-step program and about, you need to admit things, and it's an ongoing process. And so when I think about the work of anti-racism, that's how I see it. Now, that might not resonate with you at all, but the work is about consciously choosing where we position ourselves, who we interact with, the businesses that we support, the way that we react to people. So I want you to take a little time to look at what does it mean to be anti-racist? Because I think in the first two exercises, we really look at ourselves. And it's one thing to be able to say, well, I'm not racist. Well, I talk to black people. I'm welcoming to all people. I don't see color, okay? Those kinds of things. But it's very different to look at the world and the systems that are in place and know, how am I contributing to them? And it comes back to this idea of the power. The one thing that I always check on that privilege is, I do not fear that I will be killed by police. I'm a big mouth. And most people would not know that about me. They would think, oh, she's this nice, quiet church lady. I worked in parish ministry. And I had an incident on my street, and it wasn't the first time, but that was the most recent, where a young man who had had a brain injury, had spent time in jail, whatever, was home and was picked up by the police. It was about 2 a.m, and I was looking out my window because I heard this commotion, and I see them throw him on the car, and I see them just not acting how I believe the authorities should act. I ran out the front door in my nightgown with my husband chasing me, pretty sure I'm going to get killed. Never crossed my mind. He was a white man. The police were white. This was not a racial issue. It was a power issue. And it ended with me getting his badge number and calling the station. The next morning, he was there with his chief to apologize and to let me know what the repercussions were of his actions. Never in the midst of that was I concerned for my own safety. That's a privilege, not one that I ever think about. But to me, that is a part of the work of being anti-racist, is that we have that privilege, not just as white people, as educated people. And so our work is to use that privilege and bring it into spaces that are predominantly white, where people feel more comfortable to say things that we know are not acceptable. That doesn't mean that we scream at them and tell them not to talk. It means we have these dialogues about it. So, take a couple minutes to look at these ideas here, these quotes that were given to you about practicing being anti-racist. Take a few moments to think about, what does that mean to you? What lens are you seeing this through? How do you see the difference between saying, I'm not a racist, and I want to work at being anti-racist? Does anyone have anything that maybe their lens that they see this through, or something that jumped out at you in this conversation?
I think to say that I don't see, to a black person, for example, for me to say, I don't see you as black, I don't see the color of your skin, or to say to an Asian person, I don't see you as any differently than me, is wrong, straight out wrong. Because if you're not seeing them as a whole, you are blind to the cultural differences. And by the way, I mean, this community's done a lot over many years about whether sexuality. To say, I don't see you in your sexuality is also the same blindness. So we don't see them as a whole unless we see them as a whole and meet them where they are. Who cares? Just meet them where they are. That's the way I feel. And that's my sermon for the day.
And that's very much in our faith tradition. We are not just bodies and we are not just spirits. We are physical beings and have a spirituality. And so we have to acknowledge that physical part, right?
I have been watching, and I haven't finished it, Killers of the Flower Moon. It's powerful, and it is about racism. That is at the bottom of that film. Killers of the Flower Moon, it's a Scorsese movie. You know there's going to be violence in there. But in any case, I've seen 2 hours of it. It's 3 hours and 26 minutes, so I haven't seen the whole thing. But the Golden Globes, one of the best supporting actress went to the female protagonist in this film, who's a Native American. And I was watching it with a friend, and I said, well, she won Best Supporting Actress in a drama. And she knew that she was Native American. She said, oh, that's because no one else has won it, and she's a Native American. I said, you haven't even seen the film. How do you know that? You don't know what her performance was like. So when they say, do not remain silent when we see it happening, we're good enough friends that I can say that to her, and she's not horribly offended. She's a thinking type person, so she will think about that.
Right.
But it's an ongoing process for me. And another thing that's important is not to be naive about it. Not everybody's a wonderful person. I don't care what color your skin is. We're not all lovely people. To be aware of that as well, and not to generalize, and try to look at people as individuals rather than this generalization. Thanks.
Absolutely, thank you.
What jumped out at me is I thought of it in the context of what I found in the liturgy here, full, active, and conscious participation, and that I am aware, but I don't do anything about it. I'm not a participant. I'm not one to try to make institutional changes. And that's the challenge for me and probably for us as a community.
It's interesting you said that about the liturgy here. As I listened to the first reading, which I've heard 1,000 times, it's a reminder to me that even though Eli is his mentor, even he doesn't get it the first couple times. Like it takes, we all kind of need to be woken up. And I know woke is a very negative word, but it's not, right? It's not. We are called, there are so many parts of Scripture that tell us to awake from our slumber, to arise. This is who we are called to be. And so I think that was just, it struck me today that was the message that, Samuel's looking to the mentor, but sometimes even the mentor needs a little bit of reminding. Oh, okay. So we have to be persistent, and we have to be willing to say, sometimes I don't have the right thought.
Continuing some of the thinking from the liturgy, in Martha's remarks about relationship, and I can have behaviors or thinking that I'm not aware of, and I need, I've got two sets of neighbors on either side of me that are absolutely fabulous people. And I need the relationship with my black community in the neighborhood to have friendship with them so that at some point I can invite a response from them to say what I might unconsciously be saying or doing that is diminishing for them. And that's a longer journey. It's not just sitting down at a presentation, but it means I am getting to know you on both sides.
Absolutely. And so, as Sister Megan said, the sisters took this corporate stance in 2021, and it started as a direct conversation. The process started as a direct conversation following the murder of George Floyd. And I think the reason that was such a pivotal moment is that we were all in lockdown and had a lot of time to think, and were isolated, and so we could kind of do more of the internal work. But I think now we're kind of getting to a point with working with the sisters that how do we go forward now? How do we continue? I'm working on myself. You know, we were told early on, don't ask the same people that have been bearing this burden to do all the education. And so we took that on ourselves to educate ourselves. I brought just a few of the books that I read. And it's far more than reading books. It's about a way of life, you know, so we have to think about what is our commitment to that. Yes. Yes. So as we wrap up here, because I really want to honor, we're already over our time. Uh-oh, I lost. Man.
Yes, you're done.
Rough crowd. Think about this individually. How are you going to go forward individually to continue to expand your understanding, to put yourself in different places where you can learn and experience more? How are you going to continue this work? But also, as this community, how will you continue this? Sister Diane had the opportunity to have us for four times. We came out and talked with the sisters, the Ursuline sisters, and I think we were 2.5 hours each time. Okay, so this is a tiny taste of it. But you don't need us here to do this work. But we would be more than happy to share resources so that you can continue it. But that's something you all have to decide as an individual and as a community. So I thank you for your time, and do you have anything to say to end us? I'm going to end us with this very small. I got it, I think. It's every day we are learning. And this is by Amanda Gorman. Every day we are learning how to live with essence, not ease. How to move with haste, never hate. How to leave this pain that is beyond us, behind us, just like a skill or any art. We cannot possess hope without practicing it. It is the most fundamental craft we demand of ourselves. Amen.
Ann and Katie, thank you so much. I think I feel as though I have been stretched so much farther than when I first walked into this room. And you're right, this is just a skin when we need to go much closer to heart. And I hope that this is tantalizes us to take a number of additional steps. I think that would, there's a challenge there for us. So we thank you enormously for sharing with us today. Thank you. And thank you all for staying.
The word respect comes to mind because it means to look again. Respecto. So I don't trust myself anymore. After this exercise, I have to take another look. So thank you very much for that. Just a little housekeeping thing. There is a bucket for your used cups, any papers, napkins, or plates, or even hospitality leftovers that you cannot consume. They can go in the bucket, and everything else goes in the little trash. So thanks. And leave the pens on your chairs, and we'll make sure that they get picked up. Yeah, we'll take the pens back, John. You can't add that to your collection. Yeah, sorry. Do we get to keep the pen? Really? Well, we could have a prayer group, but I don't think that's going to change the results of the election. Just like what she's suggesting, when you see it, when you see something, say something. When you see something, say something. The pen lady. You need to know what you believe is I think I saw enough before you were president that I don't think the world can tolerate. That's why I started on my this isn't going to change anything, but it's my way of saying this is not acceptable. Not acceptable. Literally, we could come up with a prayer for the community and say, rather than say, okay, everybody meets here on Monday, we could just say, the one thing on Monday, everybody in this room, stop what you're doing, and sit and know that you're here 20, 45 people. But like I said, that's not going to change the world. What changes a book, somebody who knows you, they say something and you say, really? You just need 1 second. You don't need to know everything about it. You don't need to know about economics. You don't need to know about commerce. You don't need to know anything about the environment. You just need to know you saw it. You saw it after 2016. And the fact that we lost anything else is dishonest, and yet still, why would you do that? And if somebody says, well, there was an election. You know, 61 different challenging did receive 60 of them. There was one that somebody said, well, you know, the time wasn't standing right, so they had on the agenda. That was just patient. Wonderful. So you need to have your elders be ready because if you don't stand there and go through it, it's not new. It's not new. And I think we can say to somebody, I have a very bright lady. I married her husband, and she just listens to Father. Every now and then I send her something. She listens to me. Well, they say, we let you decide. No, they don't. They do everything, and it's not based on we can do a prayer. Come up with a prayer, and we can say every day at 1 o'clock. You know, Monday through Friday, Monday through Saturday. But I knew right away. I said, I want you to check this out because when we stand up, we challenge you. And they don't get to talk about it. I mean, good, but nobody has. You know, we've had follow-up sessions and all this kind of stuff on the whole LGBTQ issue and stuff like that. But I think we get to do things like this, challenge in ways that other people are just too polite. I think it's our job to hope, and to hope sooner than other people hope. You know? And I was told when I did the LGBT, that's not how you, that's not, I said, it says on our website, we are open and welcoming. Apparently, we are not. You know, we wouldn't have known that literally people, wow, that's not the way to do it. People have preferences, and I made them uncomfortable. And that they were not ready to buy into everything I said. And there was nothing I said that isn't already in that phrase, open and welcoming. And it was interesting. It was good. And now, a year later, we were in the Pride March downtown. First time we were in that. And now, on the sandwich board out here, we've got a rainbow and it's on our website. A year and a half ago, people would have thrown things. So this was good. Well, the social justice thing, we'll have to, and maybe we've got a lot of resources there. Yeah. We have a weekly newsletter. We could just keep putting it in there. Oh, good. Yeah, we can literally put something every week until we run out. Start repeating things, no one's going to know. But I think that if we can't do that, Saturday morning, I hear ladders, and he's up there banging underneath the eaves. I said, I thought you were done yesterday. He said, well, the boss says we're done, but I didn't pay you. Is he going to pay you for coming back tonight? I said, what do you want for lunch? Don't come off the ladder, right? Wait, I'm buying you lunch. And he's been my brother now for 7 years, just been at my daughter's house. Now and then he tells stories what he has to do. He pulled over, dragged it, slammed on the hood of his car in front of his 6-year-old daughter. She's petrified. And it was because they said, what are you doing here? What are you doing driving this car? You're in this thing. We know why you're here. And he said, check my pockets. My ID's in my back pocket. Run the license. You know, and at the very end, no apologies or anything like that. Be careful where you go from now on. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And it was an unmarked car. He said, sir, I never saw a badge. I never saw an insignia. I had no idea who you were. Why would I pay attention to a white guy that's telling me to pull over? No apology. And then I had the audacity. Well, if I'd have been there, I would have done it. Well, they're the privilege all over again. So, well, and I will.
I just heard from a number of people, they really want you back for an extended, we should do this like for one of the retreat days, maybe.
Oh, we could. We could. Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, if it took the Ursulines 10 hours, I mean, if they do that in the Greenwood, what should happen in the drive? We're a mess. What do you want?
Anyway, Ann, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking. My privilege.
I'll mail it. Yeah, just leave it on the table and I'll
Call
Oh.
and say, oh, I lost my.
We found it. It'll be in the mail.
Way to put on the table.
Yeah, because we can't.
Mail those.
Yeah, anything left over, we're gonna mail. Tuesday. We'll mail tomorrow.
So if she calls, it's you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Thanks.